The Casanova killer, the cross-country killer, Glenn Edward Rodgers, a charming, handsome and volatile individual, Glenn was the focus of an all-points national manhunt after a cross-country rampage that left at least 4 women dead in 4 separate states. The consummate ladies' man, Glenn liked to pick up blonde and red-headed women in bars and ask them for a ride home. Then he would try to spend the night with them. All those charmed by his redneck good looks are now stretched out in the morgue. The killings came usually as a drunken afterthought. Glenn is an example of a spree killer who, unlike serial killers, does not have cooling-off periods between kills. His killings were the consequence of impromptu bursts of rage. His first victim is believed to be a former housemate whose corpse was found in January 1993 under a pile of furniture in an abandoned house owned by the Rodgers family. His next known kill was a woman he met at a bar in Van Nuys, California. On September 1995, she was found raped and strangled inside her burning pickup truck. The third victim, another barfly, was found stabbed to death in her bathtub in Jackson, Mississippi on November 3. Yet another woman's body was found in a bathtub in Tampa, Florida on November 5. His last victim was found stabbed to death in her bedroom on November 11 in Bossier City, Louisiana. "He's getting to be like one of your serial killers," said a Hamilton, Ohio, police detective. Rodgers, a construction worker, grew up in Hamilton where he had frequent run-ins with the law. Once he poked a lit blowtorch through the peephole of his front door when police came in response to a domestic violence call. Authorities believe that he might be linked to as many as 12 deaths. In California, Rodgers is a suspect in 4 unsolved killings in Ontario and Port Hueneme. 2 days before his arrest, he told his sister that he was responsible for more than 70 deaths. Later he recanted the number and said he was merely joking. According to authorities, Glenn was being cooperative during a 6-hour interview after his arrest on November 13. On May 7, 1997, Glenn was convicted of murder in a Tampa court for killing a woman he had met in a bar. The jury took 8 hours to find him guilty of the murder of Tina Marie Cribbs and the next day, just 3 hours to recommend the death penalty. After the Tampa trial, Rodgers faces 3 more trials in separate states. However, none of these states have filled charges yet. Rodgers and the victim met at a bar where Ms. Cribbs was waiting for her mother, Mrs. Mary Dick. Mrs. Dick was late, and Ms. Cribbs left a beer at the bar and asked friends to tell her mother she would be back shortly. She drove Rodgers to a motel in Tampa and the two went inside and had sex. In a fit of rage, the ex-carnival worker stabbed Ms. Cribbs twice, twisting the knife as he pulled it out from 8 and 9-inch wounds in her chest and buttocks before leaving her to a slow, agonizing death in a motel bathtub. During the 7-day trial, the defense maintained that Rodgers wasn't the murderer. Furthermore, Hamilton, Ohio Police Sergeant Tom Kilgore testified that Rodgers had worked for the department as a paid undercover narcotics informant, making hundreds of cases over the years without ever breaking his cover. In his closing argument, defense attorney Nick Zanardi said the state rushed to judgment. Glenn Rodgers is a thief, not a murderer. A thief, it seems, with a nasty habit of leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. On July 11, 1997, Glenn was sentenced to Florida's temperamental, Old Sparky, for the stabbing death of Tina Marie Cribbs. Glenn's brother Claude, a real estate agent from Palm Springs, California, said after the sentencing, "If you watch my brother, he's been sitting watching a movie. I don't think reality has set in." Glenn, through his lawyer, is still claiming he is innocent. On the 11th of May 1995, Tina Marie Cribbs was seen leaving the Showtown barn in Tampa with Glenn Edward Rodgers. On the 11th of July 1995, a cleaning person found Cribbs in a Tampa motel room. She had been stabbed in the chest and the buttocks. According to Cribbs' mother, Tina always wore a sapphire and diamond ring and a gold watch. These pieces of jewelry were not found with Cribbs' body. A bartender told police that Rodgers had bought Cribbs and her friends drinks. Later, Rodgers asked Cribbs for a ride. Cribbs told her friends that she would be back shortly to meet her mother. Cribbs' mother arrived at the bar and paged Cribbs because she had not returned to the bar. A motel clerk said that Rodgers had arrived in a cab at the motel a few days prior to the murder. On the 11th of May 1995, Rodgers paid for another night and asked that no one clean his room. The clerk then observed Rodgers packing suitcases into a white Ford Festiva. On November 13, 1995, Rodgers was arrested in Kentucky driving Cribbs' car, which he claimed a girl had loaned him. Rodgers also claimed that the girl was alive when he left. Several days earlier, on the 11th of June 1995, Cribbs' wallet was found at a rest area on Interstate 10 in North Florida. Fingerprints lifted from the wallet and the Tampa motel room were matched to Rodgers. On the 7th of September 1997, the state of California indicted Rodgers on counts of first-degree murder and arson. The governors of California and Florida reached an extradition agreement that would extradite Rodgers to California to stand trial. Rodgers would then be transported to Florida to serve his sentence once the trial in California was completed. Rodgers was extradited to California in October of 1998. He stood trial for strangling Sandra Gallagher and leaving Gallagher's body in her burning automobile. Rodgers was convicted of first-degree murder and arson on June 22, 1999 and sentenced to death on July 16, 1999. He then was transported back to the control of Florida's Department of Corrections in August of 1999. Glenn Rodgers filed his direct appeal in the Florida Supreme Court on the 9th of November 1997. He raised several issues on appeal. One issue was that the state of Florida did not present sufficient evidence to support the charges. Another issue was that the trial court erred in the handling of mitigating circumstances. Rodgers also argued that the trial court should have granted the defense's motions for a mistrial because a witness was allowed to testify about a misdemeanor for which Rodgers was convicted in California. The prosecution was allowed to present an improper argument during closing arguments, and because the Hillsborough State Attorney's Office was allowed to prosecute the case. Rodgers also contended that there was newly discovered evidence and that the sentence of death was not proportionate to the crime committed. The Florida Supreme Court affirmed the conviction and sentence on the 3rd of January 2001. Rehearing was denied on April 24, 2001. A mandate was issued on the 6th of June 2001. Rodgers filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus on October 13, 1997 with the Bradford County Circuit Court. The Circuit Court denied the petition and granted the extradition of Rodgers to California in order to stand trial for first-degree murder and arson on the 12th of August 1997. Rodgers filed an appeal of the habeas corpus denial and the order of extradition to California on the 1st of May 1998. The Florida Supreme Court affirmed the decisions of the Circuit Court to deny the petition of habeas corpus and to grant extradition to California on May 14, 1998. Rehearing was denied on the 7th of October 1998. A mandate was issued on November 13, 1998. Rodgers filed a 3.850 motion with the Circuit Court on September 28, 2001. He filed amended motions on July 18, 2002 and the 5th of August 2003. The motion was denied on the 3rd of August 2005. On the 4th of November 2005, Rodgers filed a 3.850 appeal in the Florida Supreme Court. The appeal is currently pending. On September 21, 2005, Rodgers filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the Florida Supreme Court. The petition is currently pending. Found guilty of slaying woman in California, June 22, 1999, Los Angeles, App. A man already sentenced to die in Florida was convicted today of first-degree murder for strangling a woman in Los Angeles. The same jury that convicted Glenn Rodgers was to decide later whether he also should face a death sentence in California or get life in prison without chance of parole. Rodgers, 38, was convicted of killing Sandra Gallagher in September 1995. The 33-year-old mother of three met Rodgers in a bar, and her body was found later in a burning truck. Prosecutors claimed that was the first of several killings by Rodgers during a month-long, cross-country crime spree in 1995. In addition to his 1997 Florida conviction in the killing of a woman stabbed in a Tampa, Florida, motel room, charges against him are pending in Jackson, Mississippi. Another alleged victim was found in Bossier City, Louisiana, but no charges were filed in that case. An automatic appeal of his Florida death sentence is pending, and no execution date has been set. Rodgers was born and raised in Hamilton, Ohio. He was one of 7 children born to Edna, née Sears, and Claude Rodgers. Claude was a hydro-pulp operator at the local Champion Paper Company. Rodgers was expelled from his junior high school before he was 16. Sometime after his expulsion, his 14-year-old girlfriend Deborah Ann Nix got pregnant by another man. The young couple married and had another child in 1981. In 1983, Nix filed for divorce, alleging physical abuse. The 2012 documentary My Brother the Serial Killer examined Rodgers' crimes and included claims that Rodgers killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman in 1994. According to Rodgers' brother Clay, Rodgers claimed that, before the murders, he had met Brown and was going to take her down. During a lengthy correspondence that began in 2009 between Rodgers and criminal profiler Anthony Mialis, Rodgers wrote and created paintings about his involvement with the murders. During a prison meeting between the two, Rodgers claimed O.J. Simpson hired him to break into Nicole Brown Simpson's house and steal some expensive jewelry, and that Simpson had told him, "You may have to kill the bitch." In a filmed interview, Glenn's brother Clay asserts that his brother confessed his involvement. Rodgers' family stated that he had informed them that he had been working for Nicole in 1994 and that he had made verbal threats about her to them. Rodgers later spoke to a criminal profiler about the Goldman-Simpson murders, providing details about the crime and remarking that he had been hired by O.J. Simpson to steal a pair of earrings and potentially murder Nicole. Rodgers was the subject of an episode of the FBI Files titled Deadly Stranger, Season 3, Episode 12. He was also the subject of an episode of Southern Fried Homicide titled Smooth Talking Devil, Season 3, Episode 2, on Investigation Discovery. The Oxygen Channel's series It Takes a Killer episode, The Casanova Killer, runtime, 22 minutes, air date, September 2, 2016, focuses on 4 of the murders linked to Rodgers and the manhunt leading to his capture. The 2019 film The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson purports to tell the story as asserted by Rodgers and his family about his involvement with Nicole Brown Simpson. Rodgers is portrayed by Nick Stahl, and Mena Suvari portrays Nicole Brown Simpson. The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson is a 2019 American crime horror film directed by Daniel Farrands. The film is loosely based on the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, presenting a version of events in which Brown Simpson is murdered by serial killer Glenn Edward Rodgers, and not by O.J. Simpson, her ex-husband and the primary suspect in the case. Though Mena Suvari's performance as Nicole Brown was praised, the film was panned by critics. Serial killer Glenn Edward Rodgers' brother is absolutely certain he murdered Nicole Brown Simpson. In the early morning hours of June 13, 1994, the bodies of 35-year-old Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend, 25-year-old Ronald Goldman, were found laying in pools of blood outside Simpson's Brentwood, California condominium. As reported by Penn Live, both Simpson and Goldman were stabbed multiple times, and their attacker had fled the scene. In the course of their investigation, authorities learned Nicole was the ex-wife of former football star Orenthal James, O.J. Simpson. App News reports law enforcement officials went to O.J.'s house at approximately 4:30 a.m. to inform him of her death. They immediately noticed what appeared to be a bloodstain on O.J.'s Ford Bronco, as well as a trail of what appeared to be blood leading from the vehicle to the front door of his home. As they were suspicious of O.J.'s possible involvement in the murders of Nicole and her friend, authorities obtained a search warrant to search the inside of the vehicle and home. O.J. Simpson was charged with. During the subsequent search of O.J. Simpson's property, law enforcement officials found a bloody glove, which was similar in appearance to a glove found at the scene where Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were killed, via App News. They also found more bloodstains inside Simpson's vehicle and home. Simpson was ultimately arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder with special circumstances on June 17, 1994. However, he vehemently denied any involvement. During the trial, which was broadcast on television and gained worldwide attention, prosecutors argued that O.J. and Nicole had a notoriously volatile relationship, and O.J. was jealous of Nicole's relationship with Goldman. Meanwhile, O.J.'s defense team argued that he was framed by police officers who had a history of racist behavior. They also argued that the evidence against O.J. simply did not prove he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial, which lasted 9 months, concluded on October 3, 1995, when jurors determined O.J. Simpson was not guilty in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, via Newsweek. The details of the trial and the outcome remain points of heated controversy. Although Simpson and his supporters believe the jury made the correct decision, others believe the former football star got away with murder. Those who support Simpson's acquittal have suggested several theories as to who actually killed Brown, Simpson and Goldman. One of the more recent theories, presented in the 2012 documentary, My Brother the Serial Killer, suggests the friends were actually murdered by serial killer Glenn Edward Rodgers. ABC News reports Clay Rodgers said he is absolutely certain that my brother killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, underlining that Glenn had the means and opportunity to kill them, as he was working as a house painter in the area when they were murdered. Glenn also reportedly mentioned Brown Simpson to his family members in the weeks before she was killed. As reported by ABC News, Glenn Edward Rodgers told his brother and sister that he met Nicole Brown Simpson and noted that she was wealthy. He also allegedly mentioned that he planned to take her down on at least one occasion. In a later interview with criminal profiler Anthony Mioli, Rodgers claimed O.J. Simpson hired him to steal a pair of earrings he gave his former wife while they were married. According to Rodgers, O.J. ordered him to kill Nicole during the robbery. Rodgers also provided specific details about the deaths of Brown, Simpson and Goldman, which further supported his claim that he committed the brutal murders. ABC News reports that in addition to knowing details about the murders, Rodgers was able to draw a detailed picture of the knife he claims to have used to kill the victims. Mioli said the picture closely resembled the weapon that was likely used to commit the murders but was never found. According to ABC News, filmmaker David Monahan said he believes the information provided by Rodgers' brother, combined with his confession to the criminal profiler, should have been enough to prompt an official investigation into his possible involvement. ABC News reports Ronald Goldman's father, Fred, disagrees. When asked about the information presented in the documentary film, Fred said, "The fact of the acquittal at the hands of the jury will never wash away this murder from the hands of O.J. Simpson, no matter how many Glenn Rodgers pop up on the media radar screen." Elsewhere, ABC News analyst Dan Abrams admitted, the filmmaker has created a compelling case. However, he said Glenn Edward Rodgers' confession did not negate the sheer volume of evidence proving O.J. Simpson was directly responsible for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. Rodgers was ultimately arrested 6 weeks after Brown, Simpson and Goldman were found murdered. Law enforcement officials said he went on a crime spree and is suspected of more than 70 murders throughout the United States, via ABC News. Rodgers was convicted of several murders and was subsequently sentenced to death in both California and Florida. However, he was never arrested and indicted in Brown, Simpson, and Goldman's deaths, nor was he mentioned as a person of interest in those crimes. As reported by Bustle, another theory suggests O.J. Simpson's eldest son, Jason, killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. According to the theory, Jason, who was 24 years old at the time, committed the murders himself. However, the speculation also suggests O.J. was present at the scene. The theory was originally presented by William C. Deere in his 2014 book, O.J. is Innocent and I Can Prove It. Although the theory is compelling, Jason had an alibi, as he was working at a restaurant on the night Brown, Simpson, and Goldman were killed. Authorities also have never given any credibility to the theory. Another theory was presented by Johnny Cochran, a member of O.J. Simpson's defense team. Bustle reports Cochran suggested Brown Simpson either owed money to drug dealers or was killed while drug dealers were in the process of trying to locate one of her friends. As is the case with the other theories, authorities have not suggested they believe Brown, Simpson, and Goldman's murders were drug-related.